Reading 76 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Maurice Nicoll, Volume 2. Quaramid Ugle, May 19, 1945. On taking in impressions. In a general sense, we cannot take in new impressions unless we have new impressions of ourselves. Particularly, can we not take in new impressions of other people unless we have begun to have new impressions of ourselves? To leave oneself out and begin with others is exactly what the work does not teach. We have to begin to change in ourselves before anything can possibly change for us in the outer world of things and people and events. When one is satisfied with oneself, it is difficult to understand what self-change means. So it is difficult to get new impressions. Then, since this thing oneself remains as it was, one takes in only the old stereotyped impressions of people and the world. Why is this so? It is because one's level of being is the receptive thing on which impressions fall. It can only receive what it does, and can receive nothing new. I was talking some time ago to a man who has died since. He had nothing to do with the work. I said to him that if he could see, let us say, Sir Augustus Smith, and not identify so much with him, he would probably get better in health and live longer. However, this is difficult. It always sounds strange that one has to see Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so. Yet the most important thing in this system of teaching inner change is just this. Mr. O used often to return to this theme and emphasize it. We have to do the same, for although we have heard it before, we keep on forgetting it, keep on not understanding it, not quite getting what is meant. We do not, for example, easily see that we live with a person called ourselves. We take this person as ourselves. We never draw a distinction between the person and ourselves. But it is on this drawing of a distinction that the work lays such emphasis, for unless this separation has begun, the inner action of the work cannot come into operation. Here are two sheets, one of cartridge paper and the other a covering stuck to it. Before the work can inscribe its meaning, the covering must be separated from the underlying surface. So personality must be separated from essence. Or to use a different angle of approach, so, in my case, I must separate from Dr. Nicoll. But you will notice that a quite new impression of oneself is necessary for anything of this kind even to begin to happen. A complacent man is not likely to be able to shift 1 millimeter from his inner satisfaction because he is satisfied with himself. A complacent man is not likely to be able to shift 1 millimeter from his inner situation because he is satisfied with himself. So he will not be able to get new impressions of himself or of anything else. He is fastened down inside. Yes, but all of us are fastened down or stuck to something we have to get unfastened from, unstuck. It is like these two sheets of paper. One is real, the other is not. But they seem to be one because they are stuck together. Yet they can be separated, but all this can take place only psychologically. It is one psychology stuck to another. It is nothing about things we can see or handle. That is why it is difficult. It is difficult because it is all about the invisible world in which we live, and it is of such importance where we go and what we do in this invisible world, accessible only to our consciousness. The work is about this invisible world and what separations are necessary in it and what directions must be taken in it. But naturally enough, we find it very difficult to understand that it does matter, not so much what we think or feel, but what thoughts and feelings we identify with and say I to. No one can practice this without making a certain kind of effort called work effort. What is this kind of effort? It starts with becoming conscious of this invisible world in which one is. But as I said, this requires a definite kind of effort of attention and also the application of a definite kind of knowledge. So we have to observe ourselves from what the knowledge of the work says. If you have not the knowledge, then you cannot observe yourself rightly. Understand that you cannot work unless you see something of what is meant here. To take yourself as yourself and merely add the work to this crude, undeveloped inner state is useless. You will get all wrong. A man must divide himself into two before he can shift from where he is psychologically. You must all realize that people and yourself are not merely somewhere in space and time, rich or poor, tall or short, old or young, but each is somewhere at some level in this invisible psychological world. Then ask, where are you? Ask yourself and notice. I repeat that you cannot begin to do this work unless you see something of what is meant here.